Hello and welcome to the Cameo Show. I'm your host, Cameo, and today I am joined by my husband and co-host, Mr. Greg Braun.
What's happening? Excited to be here.
Greg starts us with a dad joke, so I assume you're prepared.
I'm ready.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right. So, what did Spartacus say when the lions ate his wife?
I don't know.
Nothing. He was gladiator.
Gladiator. Somehow he always nails it right to the topic because today we're talking about marriage and why it's important to stay connected amidst all the chaos in our daily lives. So let's be honest, a marriage looks quite a bit different than maybe it did 50 years ago or more because you have so much going on. You have a lot of times both spouses working outside of the home, children who are involved in activities that require more than just a trip to the local ball diamond, sometimes out of state trips. You have high stress jobs. And then, of course, just trying to have your own activities and personal pursuits. Like it is busy in a way that's different when mom stayed home, took care of the house, took care of dinner. The kids went to school, the local ball diamond, dad went to work, came home for the evening, and that was that. Now, I'm not saying that's how it looks in every household or that one's better than the other. I'm just contrasting that many years ago, it looked a lot different. We didn't have these things, these phones, and instant access to everything that we possibly could have and know what's going on in everybody's world all the time. So it's difficult to stay connected with each other as partners, as a married couple. And it sometimes feels like you start living parallel lives. One parent is running one kid while the other's running the other. And one person is at work while the other one's on a work trip. And even if you do things together, it can sometimes feel disconnected, even if you're in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that we have personally experienced that. We've been together almost 20 years, 2 decades, which is insane. Married 17 of those, and we have seen high peaks and low lows in our relationship and everywhere in between, from being buried in debt and almost getting a divorce to building a life together, moving across the country and reconnecting, recharging our marriage, building businesses together, writing and producing music together. Like we have done a complete 360 in our marriage. And one of the reasons that I feel that has been possible is because we've made it a focus to stay connected amidst all the chaos.
Yeah.
Often, or at least in our case, what was lacking was really just
Connection.
And it was the connection that we had right out of the gate that was missing, and it wasn't anything that was over the top or grandiose or huge quantity of time. It was just this pure quality connection.
Yeah. I think it's easy to forget that it's 3 parts: me, you, and the marriage. When it wasn't doing well for us, it was me versus you. At least that's how it felt, And it was like, this is what I want. And then it was like, you have these negative thoughts about the other person that we're not on the same page, and you start growing apart. But once you check in with the marriage and look at the marriage as like a third entity to this, it's me, you, and the marriage. We have to take care of the marriage. The marriage it's not me, it's not you, it's a third party to this thing. And when that's thriving, I have more than I need across the board, and I feel electric in my life,
And a lot of times it isn't intentional. So you mentioned that for us, sometimes it was me versus you, but sometimes it isn't necessarily that obvious. It isn't that we're being pulled in different directions and have anxiety or angst toward each other. It's that it's just happening and that you're trying so hard to just survive and keep your head above water and keep everyone where they need to be and food on the table and money coming in the bank account that you lose sight of giving the other person energy. And a lot of times it's because you just assume that the other person's going to be there. Like we're in this together, so we're both feeling this. And that's where I feel like we've fallen off in the past and where it has forced us to really give that effort and energy to the idea of our marriage being the third entity in this union, which I think is such a great way to say it.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that we've made that a focus is making sure that we understand that it isn't always about the quantity of time that we spend together, but the quality. And it isn't always about doing something grandiose, but it's about doing something that's meaningful with each other. For us personally, and maybe this you see this in your marriage, it always felt like we had to plan something big. It had to be some big elaborate date night. It doesn't have to be. I'm just as happy spending time reconnecting with you when we take our dog for a walk in the morning. In fact, some of the best conversations that we have and the best reconnection time that we have is when we do something that simple, but it's become a priority to spend that quality time together and not worry about how big or how much time it is.
Yeah. The ultimate is having a once a week date night. And we don't, I'm not saying that we do that at all. I mean, like it's not possible a lot of the times. You just with schedules and everything. But I remember even when we lived back in Ohio, some of our friends started having date nights during the week, and I was like, that is a brilliant idea. Tuesday night or Wednesday night is like go out with your spouse and see a movie and go to dinner. Like back then I heard it and it was just so profound and it impacted me big time.
Mhm.
And that was during a time when we weren't doing so well. And I think we did that as well. We started going on dates and things back then, but
Yeah.
it got neglected. I mean, we weren't doing so well because those types of things weren't happening. Yeah.
It's normal, I think, or common for a couple to, again, get so caught up in surviving
Yeah.
and taking care of everyone else that not only are they last themselves, but the marriage definitely gets
Yeah.
neglected.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so until you make it a priority to say, even if it's just thoughtful text messages, even if it's just picking up your favorite takeout and saying, hey, I've got dinner tonight, like little tiny things can make a huge difference because
Yeah.
all you want as a spouse often is to feel seen and feel loved by your partner.
Yeah.
And because we're running from one thing to the next, because we're pulled in so many different directions, I think it's just easy to take that for granted and just not make it important and blow right by those opportunities for
Yeah.
that little bit of connection.
Yeah.
In our situation, you lose sight of why you fell in love in the first place because you kind of, as individuals, have a tendency to lose sight of who you are and what you brought to the relationship in the first place because things change, people change, seasons of life change, demands of life change. And so you start to be unsure of what you bring to this
Mhm.
after time goes on and after roles change and after more responsibility piles on.
We got together, you were 19. We had our first child within a couple years, Faith's born. I'm just trying to figure out how to make money at my job. I'm new in the career of sales and mortgage lending, and you're new in your career of financial planning.
And now add provider and responsible for another human being
Yeah,
to that list.
I'm not sure I can take care of myself yet. And then all of a
Right.
sudden now there's a baby.
Yeah.
And I've got, so it's just like it gets heavy quick. And then life events, and then you start going into credit card debt, and then you need to buy a new car, house expenses. It all kind of piles on, and the next thing you know, we're at odds with each other over me leaving the milk out too long. Things get way out of control because the marriage is like a bank account. It just got overdrafted, overdrawn, 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 spent over the limit. Nobody was putting anything into the marriage. I was taking care of me the best way I knew how. You were taking care of you. But this marriage bucket is just bone dry empty.
The thing about our situation was that neither of us really communicated that to each other. So we didn't lean into one another. We didn't find time to connect and then share in a vulnerable way what we were feeling or experiencing and like really truly connect. We just kind of, again, lived parallel lives, did what we needed to do, did what we knew best, did what we had to survive, and let that resentment bubble and explode because that bucket was dry. And here's the thing, had we taken a different approach and had we early on found moments for connection, we probably wouldn't have ended up in the spiral that we did when we found ourselves at a really low point in our marriage on the brink of divorce. If we had found time and made it a priority early for connection and leaned into each other with our emotional connection in that way, sharing what we were both going through instead of me versus you, me, you, and our marriage. How can we make this feel right? We could have avoided a lot of unnecessary damage, right? That we still deal with now, years later, because we're human and humans have emotions and humans get hurt and humans have things that are difficult memories to process. The Gottman Institute is a great resource for marriage, for all things research oriented about how to stay connected to your partner, stats that help you feel not only normal, but also feel hope that there is a way to reconnect, that there is a way to salvage damage that's been done. And it says that couples who turn toward each other emotionally 86% of the time tend to stay together. Small moments of connection build up. So 86% of the time, the couples that said, hey, hold on a second, like this is spiraling out of control. Maybe nothing bad had happened yet, but we are definitely not connected. This is not how we started. This is not what either of us signed up for.
Mhm.
Let's make this a priority. Let's open up to each other. Let's talk about our struggles. Let's talk about what we're missing out of each other, missing out of ourselves, what we need. 86% of the time ended up staying together. It's the ones that said, I can't do this anymore. We're not connected, and didn't see that as an opportunity to really rekindle their connection that just failed.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and correct me if you're wrong, if I'm wrong and you feel differently, but I feel like until we did that, we were like, that's why we were on the brink of failing because we didn't lean in. But as soon as we leaned in and started making it a priority to connect, even in small ways, things started turning around quickly.
Yeah.
We don't get it right all the time. And we still, all these years later, find ourselves feeling disconnected in a multitude of ways. But it's the awareness of knowing that, oh my God, this is happening, that it isn't the end of the world. It isn't the end of our marriage. It isn't the end of our connection. It's just that we haven't given it the time that it deserves
Yeah.
and that we need to recenter ourselves. That has been everything.
Yeah. For us, we lost the ability to communicate, and therefore our marriage was struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And it was simply because I could not communicate to you what I need, what I feel, how I'm happy or sad or upset, or all of these things. I couldn't communicate that to you in a way that you could see and feel and understand.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like nothing was connecting,
Yeah.
you know.
So it wasn't even just that we didn't prioritize the time. It was that when we did make time, well, back then for us, when we did make time, that looked a lot like partying.
Yeah.
It didn't look like quality. It looked like, well, we're together, we're going out, we're doing these things, but we didn't have a lot of quality time. But when we did finally have some time together that would be considered quality or time to reconnect, there wasn't a lot of great communication happening. There wasn't a lot of great active listening happening.
Yeah.
At that point, we were just happy to be able to vent
Hmm.
instead of communicate thoughtfully with each other and get it all off of our chests. And a lot of times back then it was alcohol fueled, so it came out
Yeah.
really, really wrong. And then it turned into an argument.
Yeah.
But over the last 10 years, as we've started making it a priority to find these moments of reconnection and communicate effectively, I would say that we don't not have issues. We don't not get mad at each other. We don't not have arguments, but we're able to resolve any of the conflict much faster, not only because we have more quality time together, but because when we do have that time, we are working on active communication in a way that's really giving the other person what they deserve, to be heard, to be understood on both sides.
That's 100% right. We have all the issues, we have all the problems, we have all the conflict. But the one thing we do have now that we didn't have then is the speed to remedy.
Mm-hmm.
For someone that enjoys moving the needle in life anyway, I love that we don't get hung up on stuff for days, that we can now look at each other and be like, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I'm being an asshole. I felt this way about that, so therefore I said this to you, and you didn't deserve that, and I'm sorry. And the other person being able to be like, I can understand why you would feel that way, and it's not a personal thing for me.
Well, and that also starts with us individually.
Yeah,
So that could veer off into a completely different conversation. But
yeah,
if I'm not right first and you're not right first, we are definitely not going to be right when we try to communicate together.
yeah,
And then, in my opinion, it only compounds from there. So if I'm right and you're right and we try to connect, we can usually be on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not connected, though, if I'm not right, you're not right, we don't connect, everything else in our life experiences the ripple effect of that. If mom and dad aren't right, the kids aren't right. If
Mm-hmm.
Greg and Cameo, the business owners, aren't right, our company isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything comes to a crashing halt. And it used to be for longer periods of time, to your point, but when we're not right.
Yep.
And so the importance of keeping ourselves healthy is instrumental in this conversation.
Yep.
But then keeping the marriage healthy for everything else around us is really, really imperative to everything else in life flowing successfully.
And back to the bank account. If you keep your bank account full of the green stuff,
Wait, what green stuff are you talking
you
about?
know what I mean? If your bank account's full, you can handle a couple expenses coming up, which would be arguments in this case, or bickering about something, or something doesn't go right, or if you're not riding around on fumes, it's just when you're riding around on fumes and something ticks you off, they're already in the red zone.
You can't take another withdrawal.
Yeah,
And so handling stress together is another way that we have changed the trajectory of our relationship.
yeah,
So, kind of back to that initial thought of it used to feel like me versus you. It's not me versus you. It's you and I versus the problem.
yes,
It's you and I versus the world. Like it's us against everything, and not in a like us against everything because we're anything special, but just we need to tackle this together.
yeah.
If we're already overdrawn, if we're not right, if the marriage isn't right, there's nothing,
That's
there's
when the fingers start being
yeah,
pointed.
there's not going to be any teamwork.
Yeah,
But if we're able to handle stress and mitigate stress as a team because we've been communicating and connecting efficiently and effectively and made it a priority, everything else falls into place in a much easier way.
yep,
I just remember when it wasn't that way and feeling so frustrated and unsure why. Like I just couldn't quite put my finger
yeah,
on it. It's such a simple concept, but as simple as it is to understand, it's really easy also to get wrong. We're complex. We're not like simplistic individuals. Our emotional system and our nervous system and all of those things are like our own motherboard.
yeah.
And trying to put those together is really
I know.
challenging.
And it's hard because it's not real macho to talk about emotions, but understanding your emotions and having good control of your thoughts, and really understanding why you're thinking certain things, and half the time it's not even real, it's just fear. Sometimes I might think you mean something when you're like, that's not what I meant. Just if your filters are up and you're hearing things through the fear filters, it's not going to land right. And as a guy, from a guy's perspective, my life definitely got a lot better when I started really paying attention to emotions and how I feel, and trying to really get my thoughts right.
Yeah. Well, and I would say the same. I tend to veer to the logic side of things versus emotional. So, men versus women, I get that contrast that typically men are less able to communicate their emotions, but I happen to be a female who also falls in that category where that's challenging for me. And once I've opened myself up to being allowed to feel things, it has completely changed how I communicate them to you, how I internalize things, how I communicate with myself, how I interact with the world around me. And that in and of itself has been huge.
Hmm.
Understanding your own emotions is really difficult. Then needing to understand your spouse's or your partner's emotions feels almost impossible.
Hmm.
And so, some of the ways that we've tried to do that, aside from prioritizing time, is to connect in ways that are less heavy and like
Hmm.
be a little more playful.
Hmm.
You don't have any trouble with bringing the playfulness to the
Hmm.
party. I tend to be on the serious side. I get a bad rap every once in a while.
We have 100 things you're juggling on an average day, so
Yeah. And,
yeah.
I think a lot of people do. In fairness, so do you. It's just that you tend to handle that with humor, where I tend to get a little more rigid.
Mm.
But interacting with each other and discussing things in a playful way. And I don't mean One of the things that happens is that when we do have conflict, sometimes Greg will pass over it with humor, and that makes me even more frustrated. So that's not what I mean, but what I mean is like finding playful ways to communicate with each other, or finding playful things to do together that take you outside of your norm
Yeah.
and push you to do things that are on the more playful side, whether that's hiking or throwing a football or whatever the case may be, something athletic, adventurous, where you're doing something that engages that playful side of you.
Why the hell not?
It feels
Yeah.
easier than to talk about what you're feeling because it's in a setting that isn't serious. It's in a setting that's conducive to like being open and feeling safe and feeling free,
Yeah.
right? So I would definitely say, aside from prioritizing time and making sure that it isn't about the quantity, but it's about the quality of time that you're spending together, make sure that some of that time is spent doing something spontaneous and fun and really reconnecting with what you found attractive in each other in the first place. For a really long time, we stayed away from like doing things that were around going to like concerts and music oriented things. And I don't know why, if we were just both so jaded from the experience that you had in bands, and we were just too busy to go to concerts, and the kids were little so we couldn't get away, whatever reason we couldn't. But over the last 10 years we've made that a huge priority of like
Mhm.
going to concerts as often as possible, going away for a weekend to a music festival, even traveling out of the state to go to concerts, which seems crazy and elaborate, but it gave us a chance to reconnect in a way that was fun and playful, that was enjoyable, that felt safe, and allowed us to open up
Yeah.
in ways that we wouldn't have in our house or wouldn't have in our normal setting. Definitely a couple of things to keep in mind if you find that you're having trouble connecting or finding ways to connect with your spouse or partner. In fact, a study from the University of Denver found that couples who engage in new and exciting activities together report higher relationship satisfaction. So, unity. The marriage gets to do the activity. A lot of couples do things that are adventurous and exciting individually. But if you allow your marriage to have something that's fun and spontaneous, it allows for more happiness in that marriage bucket. It puts water in the marriage bucket instead of draining it all the time. I'll leave you with this. After 20 years, it's easy, I think, to sometimes take for granted all of the things that we do for each other. And I'll speak for myself here. Every single morning, as many of you, if you're regularly listening, as many of you know, Greg makes eggs every single morning. He feeds me breakfast and makes my coffee every single morning. And I'm pretty sure I say thank you. And I don't expect it, but it's just like one way of connecting and showing me that he cares about me and that he sees me and he wants to take some stress off of my plate and that we're in this together. And I know that. And I'm going to get all emotional and it's going to be weird. So I'm going to try to keep it at bay. But like, pay attention to those little things that are happening in your day to day life that feel like they're just the normal, that get overlooked so easily, because those are the important things. And remember to be grateful for every single second of them. Every time Greg does something that would be easy to overlook, I try to remind myself how special it is. So when we have family dinner, he turns on whatever music goes with the cuisine that we're cooking. So if we're having Italian food, he'll turn on Dean Martin. And if we're having Mexican food, he'll turn on mariachi music. Like, tries to make it fun and tries to like connect and make everyone in the room, including me as his spouse, feel safe and feel seen and have a great experience. And those are moments that like I could overlook, or I can look at them and feel connection to my husband in that way. Little tiny things that he's doing that he doesn't have to go out of his way to do. Again, they're not grandiose, they're not huge quantities of time. They're little tiny things that, if I'm paying attention, allow me to feel connected to him in ways that are important and imperative to the success of our marriage. So I say that to encourage you to practice gratitude in your life. Sure, I know everybody says it and you hear it and you see it, but I mean, really pay attention to those opportunities for connection that may just feel like another moment of everyday life. Pay attention to the little things and it will allow you to feel. It will allow you to feel. That's a complete sentence.
Just having gratitude in the fact that you chose your spouse,
Your chows.
your spouse chose you, don't forget how to have fun with each other and date each other. And life's too short to be serious all the time. So,
Yeah.
and life's heavy, especially when you're married and you've got all these responsibilities, and that's your best friend, your co-pilot in life. And sometimes you just need a good date night to remind yourself of that and remember how much fun you have together when you're not all these other things, when you're just together.
I think that's a really great thing that you just said. That you chose me and I choose. Why is it so
Choo
hard to say?
choo.
That you chose me and I choose you every single day.
Hmm.
Not just the day we started dating, not just the day we got married. Every single day I wake up and I choose you and I recognize that you choose me too.
Hmm.
And even in moments when we weren't choosing each other happily, we still chose each other. To you listeners, thank your spouse for that and remind them of that, because that is an easy thing to overlook and to take for granted.
Yeah.
And what an honor that you choose me every single day. You don't have to. You don't have to. If you find yourself in a situation in your marriage where you feel disconnected, and a lot of it is due to the fact that you're being pulled in a million different directions, they feel like more of a roommate than a romantic partner. You know what I'm saying? Please know that these tiny gestures that have helped us, that we've shared over the years, can help you, and they can help you tremendously. It takes awareness to begin with, effort, and the ability to be open to the idea that every single day is an opportunity to reconnect and rekindle your fire and your spark and your love with your partner. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us on the Cameo Show. Please stop by my Instagram at Cameo Elise Braun and say hello. We'll see you next time.